Psychotherapy is that place you go to talk about your problems. Unless, of course, you think you have no problems, which would actually be a problem. Or you think you have problems, but they don't really matter. Or you think you have problems, but they will just never ever go away. Or they will go away, but as if by magic. Any of those would also be problems. Although to say that nobody has any problems whatsoever seems problematic. But what if a problem isn't seen as something that had gone wrong and was in need of a repair, but was itself the result of an attempt to survive something far worse? Something that couldn't be fully grasped at the time that it was happening. From this perspective, a problem is just a failed solution to a prior problem, someone else's problem, that you had to live in. The new problem becomes that the protection, whatever form it takes, is something that can't be taken off, or at least not by a conscious act, or by willpower alone. So now you have the additional problem of not being able to handle your problems very well, or constantly surrounded by people who have no idea how to help and only make things worse. What if the problem is not that you lack willpower, or that you're mysteriously fated to be in the company of inept people, but that your problem, even if it was a way to manage something else, now bears something of yourself, and is, in some sense, the deepest signature of all that you had to live through? And who on earth would ever want to give up what makes us most essentially ourselves? There's a different type of problem, which is not something bad that happened to us that we had to defend against, but something good that didn't happen, but should have happened, and we had to learn to live without it. The problem in this case is that we didn't know we were living without this thing. We just thought this is life and other people have things that we somehow lack. Yes, we don't know exactly who we are or where we are or who the person is who's doing all the things that we're doing. But the challenge is not to let anyone know about it or to think about it, because then it would just be another humiliation, a greater humiliation. The real question here is if we're at the mercy of whatever filled the absence. That could be anger or addiction or false happiness or a boycott of life. Something, anything that gets us out of a death sentence. And what is the crime that this punishment seeks to prevent from happening again? The crime of being in need of another person. Obviously the stupidest thing that anyone could ever do. This is because the closer one gets to understanding that there was no crime, the more hopeless and desperate and stupid one feels. This leads us to a central question. Why on earth would anyone go to talk to someone about their problems? Wouldn't it be better to learn to not pay attention to your problems so you could sleep better at night? And how is talking going to help anything? Wouldn't drugs be more effective? You're going to have the same problems whether you talk about them or not. And even if I did talk to someone, how would they know about who I am or what I've gone through? They weren't there when terrible things happened to me. How would they possibly know what it's like to live with them? And what if there was no traumatic event? Would I have a right to complain? Don't other people have it a lot worse? And what if people could actually hear the things that I would complain about? That would sound so petty. And even if there was something important in there to listen to, how would I know which voice? How would anyone know what to pay attention to and what to ignore? Or alternatively, what if I go and lie there and pay for everything and do everything and nothing really happens to me? Or what if I am actually incapable of doing anything, and that's the very reason that I come, to be helped in times when I can't help myself? Would there be a real person there? Or would I be held hostage to their ego, their need to be helpful, or correct, or good? Would they have the capacity to feel things that were urgent? Matters of life and death? Or would they talk me out of it? Because they wouldn't see how I've been spinning wildly out of control. They'd only see the kinds of things that I do in order to keep myself perfectly still. So how do we know that it's not too late? That we are who we are, and there's nothing to be done? Or worse, that we died a long time ago and nobody noticed, having spent our time attacking the loved ones around us as a type of life in death. Would anyone be able to see in the shadows? And would we even want them to? Would there be any compassion for the things that come out of the dark when we're in relationships, or when we can't find relationships? Would there be any respect for what's actually there, or just the perverse delight in exposing something that nobody else gets to see? Or would there be something different than from what we expect? That there would be something to be gained from being with someone who does not see what you see or know what you know, who accepts that, but who is still able, nevertheless, to hear something on a different register. And what is the difference between listening and gathering evidence that could be later taken to some court so that we would be accused of things we never knew that we were up to, where we'd be classified and diagnosed and kept neatly in a box or file so that the therapist could remain safely away on some higher perch? Or they would disguise this attitude by being so positive and so cheery, but without any understanding of who they were actually talking to. The scary thing is there would be no guarantee that there wouldn't be any of these things. How are we to know what is our problem and what is theirs? It's as if you need to know yourself well enough in order to be able to find the place that will allow yourself to know yourself well enough. Do we go on blind faith? And faith in what? Faith that we would finally know what was going on in us so that we could be able to change? It's very possible, even likely, that if we knew everything about why we did this or that or where it came from, that things would not necessarily get any better. So again, why would anybody go to therapy? Well, people go to control their behaviors and so on. And sometimes this helps for a while. The idea is if you do this thing or that thing, then you will stop doing this thing and start doing that thing. The irony is, of course, wouldn't it be terrible if it actually worked that way? Wouldn't it be a terrible loss if we were to round up these bad parts and toss them into outer space? What if the way through therapy was less direct? That there was something in us that could be followed, something less conscious. And where would we go if we followed? To parts of town we didn't think were worth knowing about? Or places we knew about but didn't want to go? Or places we knew about but couldn't find anyone else to really be there with us? And what if someone could go there and follow that part of us? Wouldn't we be in need of them? Or worse, in love with them? Would we do things so that we wouldn't have to feel that need? Or keep things a certain way so we wouldn't have to know what it was that we were afraid of? Would we treat each other as strangers because it's just easier that way? And what if we simply allowed ourselves to be with whatever was in us? What would it be like to arrive in this way? Or to have to leave? What would it be like to encounter the actual thoughts and feelings that were taking place? What would happen then? None of these questions are questions necessarily to be answered. They are simply questions necessary to be asked.